Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break and are in for a little bit of experimentation. Ryan and I are going to try to demystify the world of blockchain or distributed ledger technology in the next more or less 45 minutes. But really what I think we want to talk about today is why is it so important to innovate insurance? And here's just a couple of reasons why, which we can summarize in one simple thing. Is increasingly we are surrounded by data, and data is power. We are in the business of insurance, that is risk analytics. We're not the only people who are strong at being good at analyzing data. We also increasingly see that when we acquire talent, talent has a lot of places to go these days, especially companies like Google, Facebook, etc. They compete for the smart actuaries, the smart mathematicians that have choices other than insurance to work for. And investors, especially as well, are really distinguishing the capabilities of financial service companies by their ability to use technology. So if we're surrounded by data, so what would that do to insurance companies? Well, one simple rule of economics is, I think we all know, insurance tends to grow fast if the economy grows fast. So premium tends to go up if your GDP goes up. Now, if we're surrounded by a world of data, it may go two ways. Hopefully, the good way is that we are even increasingly seeing our premium grow because we make good use of data and by ways of designing products or distributing products in a new way, going to markets that we otherwise could not reach. But it may also go the other way. That's the red side, the red curve on this slide. The other way is that if we see, as was mentioned a couple times this morning, other players who have and hold a lot of data, making good use of that and retain risk themselves, or come into our markets and use the data that they run on their e-commerce platforms or their large cloud computing and use these data themselves to organize in a captive way insurance for themselves. So this is really what Ryan and I are starting out with, is how can we make sure that we help the industry to move to the green side of this curve. And what I'd like to hopefully leave with you is 4 recommendations from the basic or little that I know of the Brazilian insurance industry of what hopefully you can take away. If there would be 4 things, rather than only just the magic of technology, but the 4 more practical things that I would recommend an industry like yourself to start with is, first of all, start with the things that really matter to your policyholder's life. Increasingly, I see our policyholders who are surrounded by a lot of data, and I think it's worthwhile to ask ourselves the question, what are really some key standards that policyholders need to do business with us? So if I ask a simple question, who of you here uses LinkedIn? Yeah. So who of you actually knows that there is a QR code on LinkedIn, mine looks like this, that identifies you? Who of you uses this? Right. So this is what I mean with a standard. If I show this to you later in this conference, I do not need to give you my business card. You scan this and we are linked. So this is a simple way of electronic identity. Could I also come to you as a broker and in insurance and say, this is me, can you underwrite me? So that's a practical thing that I mean. And this is what we are seeing. Electronic identity, that's a proof of ownership. If I have identified myself, I then take a picture of my car accident. I can prove the notification of loss. So that is a world that is developing and a lot of players around it. I think we as insurers can really establish standards around that. The next thing is, if we're digitizing our identity, we are going to exchange a lot of data. Insurance will be not the only one who are looking for the digital data of policyholders. And it's time for the industry, I think, to think about a fair way of exchanging data so that it's not just the way, basically, the large players so far has done. The Googles and the Facebooks and the likes have learned our new generation to put their profile online, but they are strongly in control. I see a world now where the modern digital native wants to take control back of their risk, of their personal data, and we as insurers need to have a fair trade dealing with that. And thirdly, also, I work a lot with contract lawyers, and I would advise you to do the same in this world of distributed ledger. There's this magic word, smart contracts, which you can think about as a kind of robot or an algorithm that now takes this picture of the car claim that I've sent, it sees my QR code, it believes that it is me, and it will, like we heard this morning of Lemonade, transmit or approve the claim much faster. Now this sounds all easy maybe for motor claims, but the smart contract logic can go much further. Imagine if you try to do that in health insurance. So my advice would be, as an industry, to work together and also make sure that the regulator, the lawyers, the contract lawyers, get comfortable with the extent to which we are comfortable letting approval steps be automated, machine-led, and be specific of where we still need human intervention. And last thing, it's as with a simple saying, we are smarter together. The industry that I've worked mainly in and the groups that came together to form the Blockchain Industry Initiative, B3I, did just that because we saw that a lot of these common things are for the benefit of the industry, and I've seen in many jurisdictions insurance companies doing that as well. And as an analogy, I went back to my picture box and found this picture of my grandfather who was in shipping. So this is what shipping was done like in the 50s. The cost of 1 ton converting through a port, 1 ton of goods, was $60. Sorry, $6 per ton. By the time my father took over the business, ports looked like this. The cost of 1 ton converting through a port was now 16 cents. So about 30 times less. So because someone, Mr. McLean, invented the container. And it took a couple of years, but that was basically doing a number of things. Standardizing a container, integrating, so the box now fits on a ship, a small ship, a truck, and that can integrate very easily through the ports throughout the world. And as a result, we got automation from $6 to 16 cents in something like 10 years. And world trade benefited fantastically from that. So that is to transfer goods. What do we transfer? Well, insurance is not about physical goods, but can we move from the left to the right when we transfer risks? That's really what we are about. So we are using a blockchain technology, which is a mirror image of you. If you think about ports and a physical network, this is a digital network, not to transfer goods, but to travel risk, to transfer risk. That's what insurance is about. And if we see about how that may work, so the standard here is not a container box. So a standard that we have been working on, and we used R3's technology, is a domain model. So who of you knows SWIFT? Yeah, banking. IFRS. These are standards for accounting. Do we have standards in insurance? Sometimes we would wish we would have standards like bankers or traders have. So we have worked on that. There's a standard called Accord that is a taxonomy that is quite commonly used in the US and commercial insurance. So we worked on that and to work that into so that it works on a digital blockchain. And that is a basis for us to integrate. So we've brought about 20 large insurance companies with nodes on our blockchain network so they can transfer risks to each other. And as a result, there will be automation. This will be over time an open source environment where insurers will be able to apply and develop their own applications. So what could that change to our industry? Well, today we work like this on the left. Everything is very sequential. People like you and I who buy an insurance policy will go to a broker, to a primary insurer. That primary insurer may reinsure to the reinsurer, eventually may even securitize it to the capital markets. And every time we are taking your car together with many other cars or homes and bundling them and transferring. And it's a very repetitive process. And as Gustavo said this morning, humans are not typically very good at repetitively taking data, adding it up, transferring it. there's a lot of time lost and a lot of error prone in this process. If you move to the right, think about this, how we used to send pictures around. We add them to an email, send them to the next person who sends it again. Today, what do? We put a picture in a WhatsApp or in some sharing application. So similar here, a distributed ledger or blockchain is actually allowing different insurance companies with their insured and a broker to be networked, and in the middle is a smart contract. That is a digital representation of your policy. It explains the rules. If I pay you a premium, you pay me my claim under these conditions, under this period, for these perils, etc. So essentially it does 5 things that are not new. Most of these things were invented more than 10 years ago. It is the combination that makes the unique functioning of a distributed ledger technology. So the first is it's distributed. What I just showed you is not one person centrally controlling everything, which would make it very vulnerable. It has a logic in the middle. It has a logic which for us is important. We can digitally translate what an insurance policy is, which is a promise to pay. It has an audit trail. So if I report a claim, any action I do, it is immutable. It cannot be changed without a trace. And it has a way that we can agree and have a consensus based on information that is safe. Email is typically used a lot in our industry between brokers, insurers, etc. And often it's surprising how much confidential, important information we send around in unsecure email. So this network uses cryptographically safeguarded information so that you can only see what you ought to see, and someone not part of the contract does not. And you can imagine how you can apply this across our value chain. From the primary insurers who insures, as we heard this morning, we insure the things we love, we care about, via a broker to a primary insurance company, and so forth. And the logic is the same. The principles apply the same across. The focus may be slightly different. In the personal lines, we are dealing with more personal and sensitive data, so privacy is, of course, more important. On commercial lines, the contracts may just become more complex, as a big building is such a large risk that typically multiple, like a panel of insurers, will participate on it. So the complexities may be slightly different, but the principles of how we can now transfer risks in a much more efficient way apply across the board. And what is that changing? So today, if you are any of these players, a broker, a wholesale or retail broker, a client who's looking for insurance, you have all these different information channels depending on whom you're dealing with. If you want to then reinsure, you are likely having another channel. It is like you'd be a stock trader, and depending on the stock you are trading, you need to every time go to a different terminal. Or depending on whom you're calling, you need to take a different telephone. That's unfortunately the world we live in. That's why in insurance we've had expense ratio of about 30% for the past 30 years. And if you look a bit more detail, it's a bit even more complicated. You deal with multiple insurers when you're selecting whom to receive quotes from. You may then select 2 that you underwrite with. You pass claims and premium money back and forth. And when the policy renews, you again need to turn to the market and interact with different players. And newly, therefore, what we are working on is something simplified that gives us one network that allows, in a safe way, to bring everyone on board with a safe onboarding process, which you can think of as a KYC process in banking. And that actually moves us to a quite different world. And finally, if we think about personal lines, this is going to bring us a specific challenge of dealing with personal information. Be it Internet of Things, sourced information, we are seeing more and more information that is generated. The one thing that personally that I would caution is that I think we have to be prepared as an insurance industry for a new generation who have grown up with tools in their pockets, who are going to be much more critical about sharing their information. They will be open to do that, but they will expect a fair trade. And we need to think, therefore, about digital identity and how, as insurance companies, we access that. We will not be the only ones. If you think about health data, it's nice to have a health app, but hospitals, doctors, government, and as well insurance companies will be different parties who will be keen to exchange those information. There are actually companies already today, I'm working with 2 of them in Europe, who have blockchain-based digital vaults. And the principle is to believe that in 10 years, your digital assets may be worth as much as your physical assets. And people are starting to think very carefully about whom they trade what personal confidential information with. Last word about B3I, so it stands for a blockchain industry initiative. We started as a consortium, people like you who started thinking, well, could we work together on this? So the companies on the left were the initial founding fathers. We had an interim period of where we worked as a consortium, so a memo of understanding that by which we agreed to work together. And then since about early of 2018, we are an independent company that run this network for its members to run transactions on. And the first transaction will actually be a reinsurance transaction, a so-called natural catastrophe cover. The next renewal in January, we'll have about 20 companies renewing their Nat Cat cover on our platform. It is different perhaps than the business you may focus on, but with these companies we decided it's good to start with a wholesale example, to have a technology that's proven and that can then be a platform that others can build on. So it will be live in the terms of not just a smart contract that's a real insurance policy. It should really be something that all the way to the regulator is accepted as a basis for risk transfer. So that an auditor would also accept this is a risk transferring from this book to the other book. And a network that can be considered a compliant network with proper onboarding of members only being licensed insurance companies or brokers. So finally, the choice is ours. Do we want to stay on the left side or on the right side? We are just a digital representation, similar to the physical moving of goods. And I think as we heard loud and clear this morning, starting with Gustavo's opening, there has never been a better time for us to do in the same way, but just much faster, what has it done in the physical goods world to a more non-physical world as we are. So my final 4 messages would be, whilst we started in reinsurance, this is something hopefully that can help you that this works. We believe this is a unique technology, and Ryan will speak in a minute how certain specific technologies such as Corda are well suited for enterprise insurance solutions. 3, together we're always stronger. And there's a number of things that will be better fixed if we as an industry do it together, just like the shipping industry decided to agree on one box called a container. And fourthly, we are there to help. So B3I offers basically these 3 things: an application, the first one happens to be reinsurance, but also a network. Some of your companies may already be on our network. And also partnerships. Over time, this will be an open source environment on which you can develop your own Brazilian specific broker or primary insurance solution. And that is how we want to have the ecosystem flourish. Thank you very much. I would like to point out, I'll be around here for the next 2 days. We already have members of B3I here in Brazil. I'd like to point out Terra Brasis and Paulo Botti, who is here. Paulo has been an advocate of B3I from the early days. And if you cannot get a hold of me whilst I'm here, Paulo is really a great advocate preaching our gospel. So thank you for that, Paulo. Thank you very much.